This is a video on how to make the maple leaf block. This is a 6-inch block. The measurements I'm going to show you next. If you wanted to make this a 9-inch block, just need to increase them by 1 inch in each direction. So where I say a 2.5-inch square, you'll just need to change that to a 3.5-inch square. So let's get making one of these blocks. To make a maple leaf block, you will need 2 different colour fabrics. From the first colour fabric, which for me is red, you'll need to cut 2 squares that are 3 inches by 3 inches. You will also need to cut 1, 2, 3, 4 squares that are 2.5-inch square. Then from your contrasting fabric, you need 2 squares that are 3 inches square, 1 square that's 2.5 inches square, and then you will also need to cut a square that's 2.5 inches square and then cut it on the diagonal to make 2 triangles. The first thing I'm going to make is the stem of the maple leaf. So you'll need the 2 little triangles for that, plus you'll need one of the 2.5-inch squares. I've got the front of the fabric colour 1 upright, and I'm just going to put these triangles on there as well, just as a guide on opposite corners. So this is the front of the fabric. I'm just going to use a fabric marker pen. Once I've got those nice and straight, just to mark where those edges meet. So this is where the edge of the blue triangle falls. And then once I've done that, I can move those triangles out of the way, and then I'm going to mark 1/4 inch towards the point on either side. And this has to be an erasable pen, whether it's air or water erasable, or a chalk one you can brush off, because this is the right side of the fabric and you don't want to be damaging that. So this is going to seem a bit weird. But what you're actually going to do is these outer lines are the ones we're going to be using to position the fabric, and these other lines, the first lines we drew, are going to be used. We're going to sew along those ones. So we're going to position it like this. You've got an equal amount of the triangle point off each side. This is the 1/4 inch mark that we put that was closer to the triangle, the point, sorry, and then it will look like you've got a square with a little edge around it. That's completely fine. You're now going to sew 1/4 inch on the inside of that. We're just going to sew 1/4 inch all the way along there. A scant 1/4 inch is favourable here as well. Okay, so we've sewn that first one. So what will happen is that will flap out, and we'll just cut that excess off there. I'm just going to do that with a pair of scissors. Then we're going to repeat for the other side. So I've not pressed this yet because I may as well just press both of those at the same time. We're going to align it so that you've got the right sides are together, and you're going with that line that's closest to the point again. You're going to make sure you position that centrally as best you can. And then we're going to sew 1/4 inch again, or just under 1/4 inch. Cut that excess off. And now we can press that outwards. Just make sure you get rid of that waterline first before you press it, in case it steams it into the fabric. Once you've done that, you just need to go back to your cutting board and trim that to 2.5 inches square. Mine's a little bit too small, so next time I will sew it so that my seam allowances are a bit smaller, and these extra bits can just be thrown away. Alright, let's make the half square triangles. You will need the 3-inch squares in both colours, and then what you'll be doing is putting one of each type right sides together. You can draw a line on the diagonal. This is where the fabric marker comes in handy again. And then either side of the diagonal, you're going to draw a 1/4 inch away from that centre point. Okay, repeat that again for this one. And then what we're going to do is to sew on those 2 furthest away edges. Leave the centre one unstitched. I'm a chain piecer, so I'm just going to follow up with this. If you want to know more about chain piecing, I do have a video on that too. We're doing both of those lines, so there should be 2 lines of stitching on each square. If you have a good 1/4 inch foot, you don't actually have to mark those outer lines, you just line it up with the middle line, the middle diagonal line that you drew. And now you have 2 squares like this. We're going to cut along that centre line. Once you've opened those out and pressed them, you'll end up with 4 half square triangles, and I've actually trimmed these now to 2.5 inch squares, so these are ready to go, and we've got all of our bits now to make the final layout. So I like to lay out on my machine where I'm going to put everything. So I know that I have 3 squares like this. My little stem piece needs to be pointing in, because this is the centre of my leaf, and then this is going to be the top left hand corner. It's just a plain 2.5 inch square. So all of these, you should have 9 2.5 inch square pieces now. Then we need to arrange the leaves. So the spikes of the leaves are organised like this. So this is our contrast 2 fabric. Our half square triangles are pointing inwards, almost like a bow tie. We've got the red full, or the fabric 1 2.5 inch squares in this formation with the stem pointing towards the top corner, and then these ones echo the other triangles. So that's how we're going to sew it together. Alright, so I'm going to be chain piecing again. I'm going to keep it laid out like this, and I'm going to do the two leftmost squares for row 1, 2 leftmost squares for row 2, and the 2 leftmost squares for row 3. I'm going to do that by taking the second one, flipping it over and aligning right sides together, and then sewing that with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm a chain piecer, so I'm just going to keep on going. I'm just going to chop the first one and the second one off my machine, because the third one's still there and I'm still going to continue my chain piecing. So I'm going to lay them back out, just make sure I'm sewing everything the right way up. I'm going to grab the third piece from row 1, put them together right sides together, block, that's the second piece and the third piece, and then keep going. So I'll eventually have 3 rows. The second row has the 2 fabric 1 squares together. And then the third row we put the stem next to the fabric 1 square. I'm just going to have to improvise a little bit just to make that fit the 1/2 inch, the 2.5 inch size, because it was a little bit small. So here now are our 3 rows, 1, 2 and 3, and we're just going to press the seams in alternate directions. So the top and the bottom ones will go in the same direction, the middle one will go the other way, and that's just to help those seams lock together when we sew the rows together. So now I have my rows. I'm going to sew the row 1 to row 2 just by flipping those rows so that they're right sides together. And when I said about locking the seams, you've got a seam allowance that's going in one direction, one's going in the other, so it makes joining those seams easy, because you know exactly where you need your points to be. So they'll butt up against each other and lock into place. now I'm going to sew row 3 to row 2. Making provisions for that one that I sewed a little bit wonky earlier. And that will be your finished block. We just need to press it. So there's our finished block. If you like what you've seen there, you can subscribe to this channel. I have tutorials on bag making as well as quilting. I've got one coming up on how to machine bind, so that will be very soon. My last one was about making the necessary clutch wallet, and they're just the recent ones. So if you have a look on that channel, that's how we made this block. And maybe actually in the future I'd choose something a little bit less busy for the backgrounds, so you can kind of make out that maple leaf a little bit clearer. I think it works.